Yeah, the session for today is how to configure Microsoft Teams to meet your needs in addition and with also using all other features that we have in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. It's not only about configuring Teams in the Teams Admin Center. And a couple of words on who's speaking to you. My name is Nicki Borell. I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant from Germany. Normally, in my daily business, we're supporting companies on their way to the Microsoft Cloud and using the Microsoft features in the cloud. And for today, we're focusing to Microsoft Teams. Here, a little overview about the features and the capabilities we're talking about. It's about using additional features like, for example, conditional access, information protection, Defender for cloud apps, etc., to tweak Microsoft Teams to your needs and to secure your Teams environment, or even to enforce compliance policies you have to respect. And starting the session with a little bit some fundamentals. So there are definitely two different scenarios when we are talking about tweaking or securing Teams. It's about the question, is it the content that is stored in Teams, so the chats or even documents that you stored in Teams, or is it about accessing Teams? So scenarios like it's only allowed with a company managed device, or if you're using an unmanaged device, only web access is allowed, etc., etc. And depending on these two scenarios, all the rest will come clear because of depending on the scenario, there are different tools used to enforce what you want to have in your Microsoft Teams environment. So this is a fundamental consideration. Is it about the content in Teams, or is it about accessing Teams? And yeah, let's start with the Teams Admin Center from a high-level overview perspective. So Teams Admin Center, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Your screen is not changing. It's showing the PowerPoint window on the screen.
Oh. So Teams Admin Center is split in two different scenarios, or two different options. So first of all, we have the so-called tenant-wide settings, like, for example, guests allowed, yes or no, or the other example here on the slide, are there additional file storages in your Teams environment allowed, yes or no? So this is something we configure for the complete environment. And we have a lot of stuff that can be configured by policies, which means you can configure a policy, setting up all the stuff you want to have, and then assign to the policy even to separate users or groups in your environment. So that means you can have different settings depending on the different policies. And the other side, what we have here on the left side, is just completely for your environment, the same for every user. And to give you a little bit of an overview about this, I've put this slide also here to the slide deck. We can separate the policies into compliance and governance settings, and the security. Also stuff like this can be configured in policies, but the most security stuff is just a tenant-wide configuration. With this, I'll give you an example here. So this is a policy in the context of the Teams app. And as you can see here in the screenshot, I have a so-called first-line worker policy. In my scenario here, first-line workers are not allowed to upload custom apps, not allowed to pin apps. They don't have pre-installed apps in their environment. But when you just compare it to another policy here in the environment, the global policy, you can see the global policy says upload is allowed, pinning is allowed, and already the Adobe Creative Cloud app is pre-installed for the global policy for all the users that are assigned to the global policy. And with this different settings, we have the capability to tweak Teams depending on the workloads or on the role a person have in your company. An example for a global setting is the setting about additional file storage. As you can see, there is no policy capability here. You can only turn it off or on, which means for the complete tenant off or on. Yeah, let's talk about capability with Azure Active Directory Conditional Access. So in these scenarios, it's not configured in the Teams Admin Center. It's configured in Azure AD, which is the identity provider for your Office 365 or for your Teams environment. And part of Azure Active Directory is conditional access. And we have also a couple of really interesting capabilities and scenarios using this feature to secure or tweak your team's environment. Let's start with a little bit of an overview. What is conditional access? At the end of the day, conditional access is a if-then engine, which means we have some if parameters. So is it a guest user? Is it a user in your environment? Or stuff like, is the access coming from a managed or from an unmanaged device? So this is all on the if side of the conditional access policy. And then on the other side, we have the then clause, which means, okay, if this parameter is true, so for example, unmanaged device is true, what should happen then? For example, deny access or whatever you want to enforce. Typical stuff is unmanaged device, then you require MFA, or for guest users, you require MFA. And this can be also used in the context specific to teams because of conditional access. We can tweak to different apps or to different user scenarios. An example here with conditional access, which means in this scenario, a user is just logging in, and because of we know the user, we also know that he is part of the executive group, and because of this is a more privileged account, which is focusing to this scenario. And as you can see, the device that is used is healthy, is configured, last seen in a well-known location in London. And because of this, the risk is just detected by Azure Active Directory as a low risk. But because this user is from the executive group and he tries to access a so-called high business impact app, we require multi-factor authentication. Another scenario, again, we have a user and we know this user, and this user is just coming from an anonymous network. And because of we don't know the network, in this example, we say, okay, this is a high risk, and because of this, we block access. We can tweak this to really granular settings to whatever you respect or whatever you need for your environment. Give you another example in the context of conditional access. In the SharePoint or even in the Exchange Admin Center, we can configure policies for unmanaged devices. So in my first example here, in the SharePoint Admin Center, I says under access control for unmanaged devices, allowed limited web-only access, which means a user who is accessing Teams with an unmanaged device, unmanaged in the context of it's not managed with Intune, he only have the chance to use the browser because of unlimited to web-only access. So no chance to use the Teams client, no chance to use the Office clients, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. to deal with documents in Teams. But of course, you can use the web apps to deal with document in Teams. And just using this setting in the SharePoint Admin Center, automatically a conditional access policy in Azure Active Directory is created. As you can see here in the screenshot, the naming convention is like the last one you can see here in the list. So you don't have to configure it on your own. It's done by the setting in the SharePoint Admin Center. The conditional access policy is automatically generated. And from a user perspective, this results in there is no download capability because of I've restricted to web only, which means there's also not the capability to download document. As you can see, I've selected the document and in the context menu, there is no download, or even in the navigation here on the upper side, there is no download available because of the policy which is enforcing this. Just to round this up, another capability is to say block access for unmanaged devices, which will result in if this user is just navigating to the Files tab in his team, he will get an access denied. If he clicks on Open in SharePoint, he will also get the access denied, but he can participate in the chat. So the posting, the chatting capability is still available. We only block the access to files. Because of we set this configuration in the SharePoint Admin Center, and SharePoint is the backend system for the files and Teams. This is why it only focuses to Microsoft, to the documents or to the files and Teams, but not to the chat. Configuring like this will mean that is a setting which takes effect for all the teams in your environment because of we configured it in SharePoint Admin Center, which is a really, really global perspective. So if you need it a little bit more granular, for example, okay, for this team where maybe the executive group is just working in, unmanaged devices don't have access to the files because of maybe the files are really sensitive or just containing business critical data. And to configure it to only specific teams, we need to use other features that we also have in the Microsoft 365 environment. So for example, sensitivity labels. As you can see here, this is a screenshot from the Compliance Center, and in a sensitivity label under Site and Group Settings, we have the same capabilities as I showed you in the SharePoint Admin Center. So also here we can say allowed limited web-only access, or we can say block access, and then we can assign this label to a specific Microsoft team, which means the restrictions are only just getting to an effect in this specific team, but not in the complete environment as it do when we configure it in SharePoint Admin Center. Another capability to have it a step more granular is also a combination of information protection and conditional access, and it is called Authentication Context. In this scenario, again, I'm in the sensitivity label dialog here, and I use the setting, the groups and sites menu, and say, okay, please redirect the request to Azure Active Directory Conditional Access. And please use what I called here my demo, the so-called demo context. And you see here in conditional access, I also configure my policy and say, okay, under the menu Cloud Apps and Actions, please use demo context. And with this, I can enforce really granular scenarios. I will show you the first demo about this. So just switch the screen sharing to my browser. So I'm logged in here to Teams, and I'm logged in with the user Stan Laurel. You can see here, and I'm just navigating to this team, and you can see conversations, and I navigate to files. I can access the files in this team, no problem. And with this user, I have also access to the team. It's called SharePoint Authentication Context. I navigate to the team. You can see I have the chat available, and as you can see, I did this demo a couple of times. I can use the chat, no problem, it works. But look what I'm navigating to files. Clicking on files, and the system says we cannot access the files. I don't have the chance to go to the files. And then maybe I just talk to someone, say, can you please share me the link to the underlying Microsoft SharePoint page? And of course, I will find someone who can do this for me. Let me sort out the link to the SharePoint page. Here we go. And using the link to the SharePoint page, I will get this, which means, sorry for this in German, it says you don't have access to this SharePoint site. But again, switching back to Teams, I can use the chat capability and do conversation with other people in this team. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Another capability we have with additional features to tweak and manage Microsoft Teams is using Endpoint Manager to set up or to enforce configurations for the Teams app or the Teams mobile app, even on unmanaged devices. Let's look at this. Also here, it's really interesting or necessary that you have a clear understanding and fundamentals about what you're talking, because of what we can do with Endpoint Manager or in Intune is device management, which is called MDM, or application management, which is here just called MAM, mobile application management. And these are different scenarios, because of device management means that you manage the device, which won't work for guest users, for example, or maybe if you're using another mobile device management software like Mobile Iron or other solutions, then you cannot manage the device in addition also with Intune. But even if the device is managed by, for example, Mobile Iron, you can have application policies and do application management based on Intune capabilities. So here are some screenshots, and then we also have a short demo about this. In this scenario, I create a policy in endpoint security. Let me take the laser pointer to show you the details. And as you can see here, I configured the policy not for all device types, which means I can select the device type unmanaged. In the scenario is guest users, etc., or even if you're using just another application device management software. And then in the next capability of the dialog, we have the chance to say, okay, block org data on Android backup services, or maybe don't allowed or allowed, whatever you want to have to send org data to other apps. So scenarios like there's a chat message in the Teams client and I copy it out and we will forward it with an SMS or with another chat application like WhatsApp or Trema or whatever. And if you say here, it's not allowed to send org data to other apps, there is no capability to forward messages that are originally from the Teams client with applications like WhatsApp or whatever. Yeah, show you also this demo. So I'm here in my Endpoint Manager, and I have to navigate under apps here on the left side, and then there are the app protection policies. And as you can see, here's an example that I used a couple of days ago, which is called no copy and paste for the Teams app. Let's see what the dialog is about creating a new. First of all, we have to decide for which system it is, because of in detail there are different capabilities depending on if it's an Apple device, an Android, or a Microsoft device. So let's say, okay, we configure it for an Android, and we have to give it a name. And then this is what you saw also in the screenshot. We can say, okay, for example, only for unmanaged devices. And then we have the chance to select the app. So yes, here today we're talking about Microsoft Teams, but normally when we're talking about a Teams environment, maybe also Planner is interesting to also use this for Planner, SharePoint, whatever you use in your Teams environment. So we can couple this together in one policy. And then, for example, say, yeah, the stuff like no org data in backups or sending data to other apps, allowed, not allowed, etc. All these detailed configurations are available then, even if the device is not managed in Intune. Let's go back to the slides. Yeah, so next capability is just Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, formerly known as Cloud App Security. So the name changed at last year Ignite. And we can also use Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps in the context of Teams or tweaking Teams to the scenarios you have in your environment. So a couple of words about what is Defender for Cloud Apps. Defender for Cloud Apps is just a broker service, which is used to enforce access control or app control for the complete environment. Think about a traditional IT architecture means that you have, for example, a proxy or your firewall in your environment. But what if the user is not in the company, but in the home office? Then the proxy or the firewall is maybe not affected by accessing Microsoft Teams or other Office 365 services. And this is where the cloud proxy, which is called Defender for Cloud Apps, can be used. Because from architecture perspective, this service is monitoring and controlling everything that is just accessing apps in your environment, and not even only Microsoft apps. As per today, there's a really long list, as you can see here, of apps that are supported. There is only one thing that needs to be respected, that Scenario 1, Azure Active Directory, is the IDP that is used to access, for example, Salesforce, SAP, or whatever. Or other scenario is that they have the chance to use Defender for Endpoint on the devices to control which apps are used or what is done with these apps. If one of these is just fulfilled, we can use Defender for Cloud Apps to monitor scenarios like here. So external user access, even here, unmanaged device access, etc., etc. And we can enforce policies and rules with Defender for Cloud Apps. Give you some examples, and then we will also have a demo about this. So Conditional Access App Control is the name of the feature or the combination of the features Conditional Access and Defender for Cloud Apps. As you can see here in this picture, the normal scenario is that a user is trying to access Teams, and this is authenticated by Azure Active Directory because of Microsoft Teams is an enterprise application in your environment. And what we're now doing here is a user is trying to accessing Teams. Azure Active Directory is doing the authentication, and because of we have a conditional access policy which says if someone is trying to access Teams, the request is redirected using Cloud App Security as a broker. And doing this, we have the chance to enforce policies and rules within the broker service from Cloud Apps, from Defender for Cloud Apps. And this is not only like it is really from a network perspective how it works. You will see this in the demo. The TCP/IP request is redirected using Cloud App Security and enforce the rules that we want to have. With this, let's go to the next demo. I will show the demo from the end user perspective, and afterwards we will have a look at the admin perspective, what needs to be configured and set up to get the result that you saw in the end user from the end user perspective. So showing you this browser session. In this browser session, I'm logged in with Mr. Oliver Hardy, which is another demo user here in our environment. And then I'm going to Microsoft Teams. So as you can see here, the first pop-up, sorry again, it's in German, but it says accessing Microsoft Teams is just monitored by Defender for Cloud Apps. So the user is informed that his access is monitored by Defender for Cloud Apps. I say, okay, yes, thanks for the information. I want to have access to Microsoft Teams anyway. And as you can see here on the link, this is what I said with a really true redirect from a network perspective. It is teams.microsoft.com.mcas.ms, which means .Microsoft Cloud App Security. It's still the old name, .Microsoft. It's not only like a redirect, it's really from a physical perspective, redirecting the request using Cloud App Security as a broker service. Okay, I'm here in my Teams environment. And now let's navigate to this team, and you can see there are some text messages in, and this user is now just going to this text message, is trying to mark this text message and then use the copy capability, and using or clicking to copy, I will get this pop-up which says action is blocked. So Defender for Cloud Apps is blocking the capability to copy out text from this chat message. And this can be really interesting for teams where it's really high sensitive data in, so no one is able, or even guest users are not able to copy out stuff even from the chat messages. This is the end user perspective. Now I switch over to the admin environment and show you what needs to be done from an admin perspective. So I'm here in Defender for Cloud Apps, and within the policies in my environment, I have this policy Teams demo for user Oliver Hardy. This is a user I have in the demo. And as you can see here in this policy, I have some details configured, like, okay, it's focusing to Microsoft Teams, or even if someone is trying to access SharePoint because all the files are stored there, the rule is only getting effect for Mr. Oliver Hardy. And I say action type, past item, copy item, etc. is blocked. Sorry, scrolling down, is blocked. This is the configuration I did here. I can also set up a custom information message for this user, but this is what I just configured to get what you saw from the end user perspective kicking in. Clicking on this, you can see we have some further details. I can also prevent printing or sending items or sending text messages at all, even not typing a text message is allowed then. So one example of what we can do with Defender for Cloud Apps. But what is the magic behind that this policy is kicking in for this user? And it's again conditional access. I will show you this. Here I'm back in conditional access. And going back to the overview of the policies in our environment, there is this policy. And this policy says only take effect for Mr. Oliver Hardy. I have the chance to configure for which apps this policy should be effect. Teams is part of the policy. And then in the access control, I say, okay, access is allowed, but the magic is in the session control. Because of in the session control, I say use conditional access app control, and this will redirect the request to Cloud App Security, and the policy I showed you in the first browser session is getting effective and is preventing, in this example, the copy-paste capability. Let's switch back to the slides. I've put the complete process also here to the slides. I'm really sure you will get the slides afterwards. And as you can see, there's also a link to my blog post where I describe this step by step to set up the scenario. It starts with the conditional access policy, which where in the session area, I say, okay, use conditional access app control. This redirects the request even from a network perspective to Cloud App Security, and in Cloud App Security, and I configure the policy and enforce what I want to have blocked or not allowed. Okay, let's come back to the capabilities with information protection in the context of Microsoft Teams. We already saw about the details about classifying and protecting access to Microsoft Teams, but we have also the chance to protect content that is stored in Microsoft Teams, so the documents. And again, here a little overview about what can information protection do for us. Information protection is just encrypting content by using a protection feature, which is protecting the document as a file. So the security is not located in a folder or in the storage area, so it's not protection in rest, but protection of the file itself, which means even if someone downloads or just sends a file per email or whatever, the protection is traveling with the document because of its part of the document. And even in a mobile world, this is a really, really powerful architecture. So a little bit an overview. In information protection, we have the chance to configure labels, and the label is just containing the details about which rights or which capabilities are still allowed or assigned within the label and which are not. And of course, which user or which group have access to this label. And on the other side, we have to configure a so-called policy. And the policy is just managing administrative stuff like who can use this specific label, or for which users the label can be just selected in the drop-down list when they create a team or when they're dealing with a Word document, etc. And at the end of the day, the combination of these two things, so the labels and the policies, is what we know as information protection capability. So within the backend service, we are providing policies and labels. We are assigning policies to users, which mean these users are able to use the labels that are part of the policy, and we can assign, or these users then can assign the labels to document or even to teams. That means if we have the scenario that we say, okay, in this team, every content, every document that is stored under files needs to be protected automatically, we can use the auto labeling policy for SharePoint, Exchange or OneDrive that we have as part of information protection in the Microsoft Compliance Center. Which means we have to set up, okay, in this scenario, maybe even a SharePoint site, or when we are talking about specific users. So for example, the management of a company, we can configure their personal OneDrive accounts. And then we have to assign it to the specific sites or site collections that are depending or just focusing to a Microsoft 365 team. There's also a link in the slide deck where I described this step by step, how to use these auto labeling policies in the context of Office 365 and even Teams. Of course, the auto labeling capability I showed you in the last slides are only focusing to Microsoft file formats like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. We also need and we also have the chance to label non-Office files. So PNG, PDF, whatever is normally also available in your environment. And to do this, we are again with Defender for Cloud Apps. Even if we have scenarios that we don't say, okay, every document in the site collection that is just associated with a team needs to be protected. But for example, only documents in a specific subfolder in the document library. Then we can use Defender for Cloud Apps because with this feature, we have the chance to set up much more granular policies. Show you a demo also about this. No, this is the wrong browser, sorry. So here we are. Okay, first of all, in the information protection area in Microsoft Compliance Center, as you can see, here are a couple of labels. Here's, for example, the label for the authentication context, but also other labels are configured here. And in this information protection menu, I have also the capability auto labeling. And navigating to this, you see in the live environment what you already saw on the screenshots in the slide deck. So the capability to set up auto labeling policy. Navigating to this, and first of all, okay, we have to give it a name. After this loaded, sorry for the waiting. So we can configure auto labeling policy here. Just don't lose. Yeah, now we have it. Okay, let's say we create a custom policy. First step is we have to give it a name. And then in the next step, we have to configure, okay, for which specific SharePoint site collection. As you can see, I can also say for all of them or only for specific. And then I have to fill in the link to the SharePoint site collection, which is associated to a team. And then I can enforce an auto labeling policy, which means that every document that is stored in this team will automatically get a specific label. This is the first scenario. Another scenario we can use here is again with Defender for Cloud Apps. Show you this. Here we are, Defender for Cloud Apps, and just navigating to policies. You can see here there's the menu information protection. And as you can see in my environment, there are a couple of demo policies available. Navigating to one of these policies, I take this one. You can see that I can select specific folders. You can also say the complete document library, but we have the chance to say, no, only a specific folder in a document library. And then only the documents in this folder are automatically labeled. We can tweak this to specific users and groups, and we can just use it for specific labels. As you can see here in the setting, apply sensitivity label. In my example, I use the credit card sensitivity label, which is applied to every file in only this specific folder. The interesting thing here is also the reporting. On the top of the site, we have the report, few policy matched. In my example, items are matched. And you can see, so I get also the overview about what is automatically labeled by this policy in the SharePoint site collection, which means also in my Microsoft Teams. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Yeah, one other capability we have is with Defender for Office 365. It's just focusing to save links and save attachments. And one of the big pluses for Microsoft is that as per today, Defender for Office 365 is the only solution available who can do this. Of course, this is only a question by time. Even other competitors like Trend Micro, McAfee, etc., will just come over with this capability. But as per today, you can only just use safe link or safe attachment scanning also for Teams, not only for emails. So for emails, this is a well-known feature. This is not new, but there's can also be a phishing link can be posted in a Microsoft Teams chat, or even a document that is uploaded to a Microsoft Teams chat can contain malware or virus or whatever. So to prevent your Teams environment for scenarios like this, we can use Defender for Office 365. Defender for Office 365, also here from an overview perspective, is born in the context of emailing for Exchange Online protection, and it's normally scanning email attachments or scanning web addresses in documents or in emails to prove that there is no phishing or other attacks going on. And since a couple of months, we have the chance to use Defender for Office 365, also for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. And this is configured in the Microsoft Security Center. And you can see here the threat policy overview, and there are threat policy for safe attachment. And as you can see in the screenshot, we will also have a short demo about this. We have the chance to turn on Defender for Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. And the same story for safe links. Also, we have the chance to use this feature not only for emailing, but also for other Office 365 services. Okay, with this, let's go to the next demo. I'm here in the Microsoft Security Center. And as you can see, I've navigated, this is part of email and collaboration, and then we have the policies and rules. And in the policies of rules section, there are the threat policies. So safe attachments, the first one, navigating to this, we can just navigate to global settings, and under global settings, we have the chance to say, turn it on also for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams, as we saw in the screenshot. Let's go to the other scenario. It's about safe links, this one. And safe links is a little bit another behavior from the menu because of creating a new policy here. As you can see, we have to say, okay, for which user the policy should be active. Let's choose Mr. Bill Gates. And then we have the chance to say, please also respect actions in Microsoft Teams for potentially malicious URLs or phishing links or whatever. So this can be configured per policy in this scenario. Okay. Switch back to the slides again. For the capabilities, there is also integration for Microsoft Teams or for Office 365 in Microsoft Sentinel. As you can see here on the screenshot, the screenshot is taken to a time where this was preview. As per today, it's global available, but we have the chance to use it as part of the Office 365 workbook. And there is just another really new capability. It's here in the Content Hub, which is part of Microsoft Sentinel. There is just an offering for Microsoft Teams. It's from Microsoft, so it's free. And as you can see here in the screenshot, this is generating 2 specific analytic rules only for Teams, 7 hunting queries focusing to Teams scenario, and bringing you 2 playbooks specific for Teams scenarios. So if you're using Sentinel, you can deploy it for free. There are no extra costs, and you have these pre-configured content types that then can be used in Sentinel to secure or to monitor your Teams environment. Let's go to the last demo before we do the roundup. So I'm here in my Microsoft Sentinel. And first of all, let's have a look at the workbooks. And here in the workbooks area, we have the Office 365 workbook. And as part of Office 365 workbook, I have the chance to select the workloads, and within the workloads you see there is a specific workload focusing to Microsoft Teams. And then I can say, okay, please show me the activity of all users, or tweak it to specific users, whatever is in your interest. Okay, this is my demo environment, so there is not so much data in here, but you can see we get a couple of dashboards showing different activities. Scrolling down, we can also get the recent activities as part of a list. And using this, you can monitor or maybe reinvestigate, do hunting, whatever in the focus of Microsoft Teams. And using or navigating to the content type hub, which is still in preview. But anyway, we have the chance to using the Teams offering here. And this is what you also saw in the screenshot. So they're using this or clicking to install. 2 analytic rules, 7 hunting queries, and 2 playbooks are deployed to your Microsoft Sentinel environment. So it takes a couple of minutes until it's deployed, but it's for free and it's really easy to use. So definitely recommend just have a look at it if you are using Sentinel anyway. With this, going back to the slides and do the roundup. Okay. So first of all, I definitely recommend to work out together with your business decision makers, maybe data privacy officers or whoever's involved in your environment in this topic. What do you want to achieve? What is needed? Clarifying scenarios or questions like, is it about protecting content in Teams or is it about securing the access to Teams? All this must be discussed before we start planning or doing the implementation. Here's some other things to think about, like how do you want to deal with guests? Typical scenarios I know from customers I'm just supporting is, okay, guests only can use browser access, not the Teams client, and so on and so on. With this, just work out your architecture, your security blueprint. Use a testing period with selected test users. Maybe you have some evaluations or have to rework some settings and then do the rollout. It sounds really simple. Of course, I know it can be really detailed hard work, but at the end, we have definitely the chance and the features to secure or to tweak Microsoft Teams to whatever your scenario or your environment needs. And with this, I'm done with the session. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Nicki. This was a very informative session.
Thank you.
And we love the content. And personally, I do not have expertise on the Defender side, so I really like that. It was very interesting and helped me on to improve my skill set on that side also. So there are a few questions. One is that that's related to, I think, conditional access, that do we need to use sensitivity labels for conditional access in Teams, or it can be configured without them? With them. There's some typo.
Yeah. You don't need conditional. You don't need information protection in the context of conditional access. It depends a little bit of the granularity of your scenarios. If you have really granular scenarios, then information protection or sensitivity labeling can help, because of then you can say, okay, I use the sensitivity label and assign the sensitivity label only to the teams that should be affected by this by these restrictions or whatever you want just to enforce. If this is not the granularity label that you need, if you say, okay, I have just some settings which are true for all of my teams, then you can use the conditional access policy as it is.
Okay. And the second question was, is it possible to customize the permissions for guest users, like contribute access or on some documents and read on few documents within Teams?
I saw that in the Q&A area. Give me a second.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is possible doing this, which is really granular. We need to use SharePoint user access rights to say, okay, a specific user only get read or only get contribute rights on specific documents. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what also my point of view, because we got some scenarios in past and we did this, that we customize the security at the SharePoint level.
It is,
so
it is something that works, but at the end, even if you just have some experiences in this, it can be horribly complicated over the time. Yeah, but yeah, it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one is a very informative session. Thank you. And can you recommend any learning resources for Defender of Microsoft 365?
I'm not really sure if there's a Ninja training for this. There's a Ninja training for Defender for Cloud Apps. I know. At the end, the question is really from a high-level perspective. What can I recommend as learning resources? And I recommend the official Microsoft sources as a first step. So there's a security blog by Microsoft. And they're also linking to news and updates and to trainings they are offering. And this is a good starting point.
Thank you so much, Nicki, for your time, and to the MS Sector community for the Discovery Series. And we will be reaching out to you for our future events also. If you have any feedback, please do share.
Yeah, I will just send you the slides also to our email conversations we have, and I will give you some feedback with this within this. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, then I wish you interesting rest of the event and have a good day. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.